Right, let's get into the news items. We're going to go to Canada first. Canadian shoppers have emerged from their post-holiday hibernation, and they're going to find that a number of the familiar retailers have now started to disappear from their landscape, replicating what's going on in America. And 38 town shoes footwear stores will close by the end of this month, and that's on top of Jeans Machine's 24 stores that have also vanished. Also, hardware giant Lowe's announced that it would close 27 stores, including 25 operating under the Rona banner, by the end of this month. Now, one of the retail experts says those types of smaller chains are among the most likely retailers to be unable to sustain themselves as consumer preferences changes. Now, that statement backs up, whether he meant it in that terms, backs up what they're actually planning from the top end is to collapse all the smaller retailers. And so they own everything. My own personal opinion is I think they're doing this because they are aware now one day they will not be able to block the Manor World Holding Trust and the funds will come out. At the moment they are blocking, but they won't always be able to block. They know it, and so do we. And eventually, when the funds are released, the idea I'm thinking behind their strategy is that we will have to buy things, and if all the smaller companies have gone, then we're only buying off them. And this is what they're up to. Well, we don't have to buy off them, because we will have the funds to create our own companies and not need them at all. So they can quit with that game. But that's what's playing out. And this retail expert says every year now you're going to see a few of these weaker players bow out. Well, you're going to see more if they continue at the rate they're doing. And there's going to be some folks who are going bankrupt, yes, deliberately, to keep the clowns going. Now, he said the biggest factor leaving some stores twisting in the wind is the long-anticipated shift towards online shopping. We all know who that is, don't we? With Canadians, it is said, finally catching up to Americans and Brits when it comes to perusing and purchasing without leaving their homes. You're seeing Canada come of age in retail as it relates to home delivery. And talking about Amazon, online retail giant Amazon is opening a new distribution centre in Leduc County, I think I've said that correctly, or Leduc, just south of Edmonton in Canada, go figure, and plans to create 600 full-time jobs by next year. And the e-commerce company says approximately 93 square metres in Nisku, Alta will be the company's 11th distribution centre in Canada and its second in Alberta, and it already operates a similar facility in Rocky View County in southern Alberta, where it employs 1,500 full-time workers. But this is an ongoing problem that I will address in an op-ed piece later. Convenience is not a good thing. Sorry, it's just not. 3 former Credit Suisse, aka Rothschild, AG bankers were arrested in London on Thursday on American charges of involvement in fraud involving $2 billion in loans to state-owned companies in Mozambique. Go figure. No surprise. Andrew Pearce, Serjan Singh and Detalina Subiva were charged in federal court in Brooklyn, New York this week with conspiring to violate American anti-bribery law and also to commit money laundering and securities fraud. Now, they've been released on bail in London while America seeks extradition, and the former Mozambique Finance Minister Manuel Chang was arrested in South Africa this week as part of the same case. The Chang family. Oh my. Wonder where we've heard that name before. A fifth man, Jean Boustany, was arrested on Wednesday at New York John F. Kennedy Airport and refused bail. Now, Mr. Boustany is a Lebanese citizen who worked as a lead salesman for Privinvest, which is an Abu Dhabi-based holding company whose subsidiaries include a shipbuilding firm hired to provide equipment and services to the Mozambican companies. Yeah, right. Laundering and piracy. Lawyers for Pierce and Sabiva declined to comment. And the indictment alleges that the former employees worked to defeat the bank's internal controls, i.e. hacking the system, acted out of a motive of personal profit and sought to hide these activities from the bank. Now, Credit Suisse, for their parts, added that the bank would continue to cooperate with authorities, and according to the indictment, between 2013 and 16, three Mozambican state-owned companies borrowed more than $2 billion through loans guaranteed by the government and arranged by Credit Suisse and another investment bank which was not named in the document. Yeah. A sign and a big pat on the back for all of us of what took place in Atlanta last Wednesday, and a raising of the awareness of child trafficking, and 6 dozen bright yellow school buses wound their way through the streets of Atlanta to raise awareness of the problems of child sex trafficking in Georgia. It's kind of a difficult reminder that these statistics represent lives, and these lives, our kids, are not invisible, said Bob Rogers, who's the president of the non-for-profit Street Grace Group. Now, each of the 72 buses represented 50 children in Georgia who are sold into sex slavery each year for a total of 3,600. Yep, I would say that's an underestimate by quite some number. Now, Street Grace and the Georgia Attorney General's office partnered to put on the awareness event, and they, along with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, have also launched the Demand and End Georgia initiative to help stop child trafficking, sex trafficking, by going after customers. And it says by Super Bowl, or should I say Superb Owl, as in Moloch, February 3rd, all buyers and traffickers will know that Georgia does not tolerate those who seek to exploit our state's children. And he went on to say that educating the public about child sex trafficking and the warning signs is a huge part of combating that problem. Here. Another one bites the dust. This time, the Department of Defense Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Kevin Sweeney, announced on Saturday that he is now resigning from his post at the Pentagon. After just 2 years in the Pentagon, I've decided the time is right to return to the private sector. Yeah. And he said that it was an honour to serve again alongside the men and women of the Department of Defence. And this comes just last month after former Secretary of Defence Jim Mattis resigned on principle after President Trump announced his intent to withdraw troops from Syria. Now, since then, other administration officials, including Brett McGurk, the special presidential envoy for the global coalition to counter ISIS, and the Pentagon spokeswoman, Dana White, have also departed their posts within the administration. Seeing a pattern, yeah? Now, Mattis worked with Sweeney, the one who's just resigned, when he led the US Central Command, and he tapped Sweeney to be his chief of staff in January of 2017. Millions of US taxpayers will still receive refunds despite an ongoing partial government shutdown. Now, the IRS has previously delayed tax refunds during a government shutdown, and the decision comes as President Donald Trump weighs declaring an emergency over his demand for border wall funding, which, according to the Portal people and the Democrats, is the cause of the shutdown. We know different. Now, the stalemate over the proposed Mexico border wall is now in its third week, and the White House Office of Management and Budget, Mr. Russell Vought, told reporters on Monday that the administration has directed the IRS to fulfill tax returns as officials face mounting pressure to end the federal funding lapse. So they went on to say, "We have tried to make this as painless as possible, consistent with the law." And he said, and US residents are required to file tax papers by April 15th, the same as every other year, and can later receive refunds from the government based on income. Any IRS employees brought back to process these tax funds will not be paid until the shutdown ends. New Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has said this week there is no question that President Donald Trump is racist. Really? Given there was, I think it was Cambodia. I'm sure I added that news and it's vanished this week. A guy got 3 years jail for a comment on Facebook there for criticising the king. And yet here we are, have a major public official making statements like that, and nothing gets said, nothing to back her claims. One gets jail, one seems to go unhindered. So according to, in an interview, she based her claim on the words that he uses, really, which are historic dog whistles of white supremacy. You ever heard such shit in all your life? Dear me. She a social worker or something before she was a congresswoman. Shrivel. And in a statement, the White House hit back at the New York lawmakers' sheer ignorance on the matter. Ms. Cortez only took office last week as the youngest ever US congressman. She might be the shortest as well. When asked by presenter Anderson Cooper, yeah, no setting the stage there, was there, Mr. Cooper, whether Trump is a racist, the 29-year-old left-wing, whatever that means, Democratic lawmaker responded, yeah, no question. When you look at the words he uses, which are historic dog whistles of white supremacy. Oh my. And she cited when you look at how he reacted to the Charlottesville incident where neo-Nazis murdered a woman, she needs to get her facts correct. She needs to get her facts correct. It wasn't neo-Nazis. Was it Mr. Soros and his band of minions? President Erdogan of Turkey has denounced the White House National Security Advisor, John R. Bolton, more on him later, for comments he made on his arrival in the Turkish capital this week. And Mr. Erdogan subsequently refused to meet with him, which was supposed to take place on Tuesday, making any agreement between the two NATO partners over the United States withdrawal from Syria increasingly difficult. Depends who's pulling Mr. Bolton's strings, does it not? Now, Mr. Erdogan said Mr. Bolton had made a grave mistake when he said that Turkey must agree to protect Syria's Kurds in the event of an American withdrawal. And the article goes on to state it is not possible for us to swallow the message Bolton gave from Israel. And Mr. Erdogan said in a speech to political party members in the parliament that Turkey was only opposed to Kurdish militant groups and not ordinary Kurds, he insisted. And Mr. Bolton, who was in Ankara, the Turkish capital, for meetings with his national security counterpart Ibrahim Kalin, but left after he was denied a meeting with Mr. Erdogan. I wonder which faction Mr. Bolton works for. And talking about factions, after an 18-month study, the Israeli government decided, in their wisdom, to demand $250 billion from 7 Arab countries and also Iran as compensation for property and assets left behind by the estimated 850,000 Jews who were forced to flee those countries following the establishment of the State of Israel 70 years ago. Really? How about the compensation to the Palestinians, given it's all their land? And that Israel is a falsely created principality. How about you compensate all the Palestinians with all the agricultural farmland you destroyed, all the olive groves? Seems fair to me. Now, included in the demand will be $35 billion from Tunisia and $15 billion from Libya. What's that got to do with it? It's not even on border, is it? Also included will be Morocco, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Yemen and Iran. Well, I hope those countries told Mr. Netanyahu to go and F himself, quite frankly. Except they went on. The time has come to correct the historic injustice of the pogroms against Jews, really, in 7 Arab countries and also Iran, and to restore to hundreds of thousands of Jews who lost their property what is rightfully theirs. Well, Israel's Minister for Social Equality, that's on a par with Central Intelligence Agency, isn't it? Social equality, oh my. Anyway, Gila Gamliel said, one cannot talk about the Middle East without taking into consideration the rights of the Jews who were forced to leave their thriving communities amid violence. All the crimes that were carried out against the Jewish communities must be recognised. And the study is related to President Trump's soon-to-be-revealed Middle East plan. So they're demanding, they'll no doubt demand compensation to sign off on a deal, knowing full well that those countries are going to tell them, go and stick it. You know, it's the same pattern and the same plan like Brexit. They'll throw something in that can't be agreed on. like the current budget in America, they throw the wall in, which is not really about the wall, and no one's going to agree on it, and so it just stalls everything out. Same pattern repeated over and over again. Now, the Israeli claim counters a demand by the Palestinian Authority for over $100 billion in compensation from Israel for assets left behind by Arabs who fled or were forced to leave at the time of the establishment of Israel. And these Palestinian complainants presented documentation to that effect to the United States over a decade ago. And the Jewish refugees from the Arab countries never received any aid from the internation. Paul Manafort shared the 2016 presidential campaign polling data with Konstantin Kilimnik. We'll have more on him and that later. An associate of the FBI has said that ties to Russian intelligence, according to a court filing, and the information is in a filing that appears to inadvertently include details not intended to be made public and indicates a pathway by which the Russians could have access to Trump's campaign data. All very tenuous, isn't it? Maybe, possibly. Okay. The former Trump campaign chairman on Tuesday denied in a filing from his defense team that he broke his plea deal by lying repeatedly to prosecutors working for the special counsel Robert TikTok Mueller. And in his rebuttal to the special counsel's claims of dishonesty, Manafort exposed details of the dispute, much of which centres on his relationship with Mr. Kilimnik, the Russian citizen who began working for Manafort's consulting firm back in 2005. You can't make this up, can you? You would think it was related to 2016. No, it's not. Just find any sort of link, 10 years at best, and just throw it at walls and see if it sticks. So Mr. Manafort has been charged with helping his former boss to obstruct Mueller's investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election. But the incident he's being charged with is 2005. Perhaps many people who listen to the media will not reference that or hear it, or perhaps they won't even mention it. Also in Russia, a warning by the Russian Orthodox Church of people's dependence on smartphones and modern technology could bring about the coming age of the Antichrist. And this is according to the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, Russian social media users largely responded with humour and scepticism, while some accused the church of serving the regime. But on Russian TV, he said smartphone users should be careful when using the World Wide Web of gadgets because it represented an opportunity to gain global control over mankind. Absolutely. When people realise or go and view the security certificates on your phones, then you'll know exactly what he's referring to. Now, they label it the Antichrist. It's a name, it's not a person. It's just a system or a title. And he said the Antichrist is the person who will be at the head of the World Wide Web, controlling all of humankind. And every time you use your gadget, whether you like it or not, whether you turn on your location or not, somebody can find out exactly where you are, exactly what your interests are, and exactly what you are scared of. If not today, then tomorrow's methods and technology could appear that will not just provide access to all information, but will also allow the use of this information. Well, that's already taken place, as we know. Do you imagine what power will be concentrated in the hands of those who gain knowledge about what is going on in the world? Such control from one place forebodes the coming of the Antichrist. Apart from the term Antichrist, I agree with that 100%. The World Bank is warning of increasing risks, what it calls darkening skies for the world economy. No, it's just it's just the World Bank along with the IMF and the UN, because they're all bankrupt. And in its annual assessment of global prospects, the bank predicts continued, though somewhat slower, growth this year and also next year. And the bank's forecast for the global economy is expansion this year of 2.9% and 2.8% next year. Except when the trust funds come out, that growth is going to go up by 600% minimum. Except these same people that are warning of doom and gloom are the same people in collusion with others in blocking the funds coming out. The World Bank, didn't the top person, the top spokesman or whatever it was, it's all crap anyway, they're all not real anymore, got fired or resigned from the World Bank this week. One hopes we don't see Hudis as the leader. I saw their picture this week, and once a year is enough, for me anyway. A new state law took effect. It's beggars belief that they had to change it. But regardless, a new state law took effect in Florida on Tuesday that is expected to restore voting rights to more than 1 million people with felony convictions. Now, despite questions from state officials about its implementation, supporters of the law say there is nothing ambiguous about Amendment 4, which was approved by nearly 65% of Florida voters in the November midterm elections. And the new law says voting rights shall be restored to those with felony convictions who complete all terms of their sentence, including parole or probation, except those convicted of murder or a felony sexual offence. Normally I've been quite critical of Vancouver for good purpose and good reasons. Some of the things that go on in that city are beyond heinous. Of course, we've heard Kevin Annett and some of the stories to do with the Indigenous, but what you don't hear is about the mind control, Dr. Green, Mengele group that are up there. And there's a load of alt media people, program people, spouting a load of crap up in Vancouver as well. Plus the two, an ET base off the island in Victoria, Vancouver Island, and also the SSP base that's close to Vancouver, in between Seattle and Vancouver. I hope that base enjoyed the firework display today, because we did. So in the past 2 years, more than 8,000 people in Canada have lost their lives due to opioid overdoses. And some people in Vancouver were down on the downtown east side is described as the epicenter of the problem. And much of the area's drug supply is tainted with powerful synthetic opioid fentanyl. But under the city's unusual approach to the problem, users can access supervised injection sites, which allow people to use illegal drugs with trained staff present. A good move, in my opinion. People are going to take it. Let's put it in a safe environment. You know, people may remember that the solution to the drug problem I put in the show last year. Well, that's it. You're not going to stop thousands of people smoking pot or injecting themselves or whatever else they do these days. So if they want it, let them have it, but let them have it in a proper environment. Not all sharing needles and filthy back alleys and whatnot. So kudos to the people who are doing that in Vancouver. Here's that piece. A Cambodian court jailed a man on Wednesday for 3 years for insulting the king in a Facebook post. The second known conviction under a new law, Lèse Majesté law, which was enacted last year, which rights groups fear could be used to stifle dissent. Absolutely. The court announced its verdict against Mr. Cholsa, which sentenced him to 3 years in prison and ordered him to pay 5 million reals. I think that's how it's pronounced, which is roughly about $1,250. And this municipal court spokesman said the Facebook posts, which the court found had insulted the king, were uploaded in June of last year. And yet you've got a Democrat spokeswoman calling the president a racist on national TV, and nothing happens. Really. Read between the lines. The EU says the US government has changed the bloc's diplomatic status in Washington. In practice, essentially, it's downgrading it. Now, the Trump administration did not notify the EU about the change, and the EU has asked the US to explain the move. Previously, it's been the US practice to treat the EU delegation and ambassador as a country would be, and the US ranks the diplomatic status of international organisations lower, and the EU source who declined to be named said the US has changed the way the diplomatic list was implemented, but not the list itself, which describes the EU as a considered equivalent to a chief of state or head of government, but should be listed in precedence order after all official representatives of the sovereign nation's president. Donald Trump on Wednesday, again, read between the lines, threatened to cut off federal funds to fight California wildfires. Saying the money is being wasted and billions of dollars are sent to the state of California for forest fires that with proper forest management would never happen. And unless they get their act together, which is unlikely, he said, I have ordered FEMA to send no more money. FEMA has no money. It is a disgraceful situation in lives and money. Now, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi responded that Trump's threat insults the memory of scores of Americans who perished in wildfires last year and thousands more who lost their homes. Is Pelosi a senator for California? Well, why didn't she act? Could be wrong. I seem to remember Pelosi being voted in California. Clearly she did nothing to rectify anything, and so technically she's responsible. Pelosi said House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, another Californian, must join me to condemn and call on POTUS to reassure millions in California that our government will be there for them in a time of need. The government's been there for them in the last 2 years, but Pelosi and the like and Rothschilds are creating fires and throwing everyone out. And this is the final news item, an example of how the media spin things. You know, most people won't pick up on it. They'll see the headline. But the headline essentially was US taxpayers will buy about 5 million in pork products from a Brazilian-owned meat-packing firm under President Trump's bailout program, which was designed to help American farmers which are hurt by the administration's trade war. That essentially was the headline. So because the government has decided to buy $5 million in pork products from a Brazilian-owned meat-packing firm, that's not supporting American farmers. That's how it was spun on the Portal People News. What it didn't tell you is the administration, the Trump administration, has pitched in $12 billion to that bailout program as necessary to help farmers weather the long-running trade war with China, which has nothing to do with China the country and everything to do with the Black Dragon groups that are basically looting everything out of both countries. But critics, i.e. the Portal People and Pelosi and a gang of pedophile criminals, cited $5 million being spent to one company, and yet the bailout was $12 billion. This is how they work. And they're saying he's enriching large and foreign-owned firms. 5 million out of 12 billion. Oh my. That's why I told people, ignore them. Ignore the news. They're talking shite.